Okay, hello all you crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. Let's make some games. So, last time we fixed a bunch of different bugs in this here tower defense game, and it more or less plays the way it's supposed to now without doing anything unusual or crashing in unusual ways or any other undesired behavior. Although there are still a few things to work out that will be worked out soon enough. This week, it is time to open up this here to-do list and knock off a few more specific items, and that is making towers look a little bit better when they're selected. For one, and I don't know why I decided to close the game just now. So when you have a tower selected, ready to be built, or when you have a tower selected when it's already built and you want to do something with it, it looks pretty bad. This just glowing effect, this fading to white, fading to red, fading to whatever color effect, that got the job done when I wanted to test gameplay, but it doesn't, now that I'm thinking more about the way the game looks, it's not really something that I really like. I've got in mind that I would like some sort of an outline effect rather than a glow, and having the outline glow instead. And that should draw attention, that should be able to draw attention to the tower without making it look just bad. And I hear the game going, which means that the game is playing itself in the background while I'm talking. There's also a few other things. When the tower is selected, I would like to draw its range on the ground, because towers all have their own range, but it's not really communicated to the player in any way at the current moment, which it really should be. And have an outline around selected towers. I did say that. When you're in tower building mode, highlight the area where towers can be built so that the player does not have to guess based on where it changes color. Yeah. So I'm going to start with having towers have an outline effect rather than having towers, oh gosh, than having towers glow like this. So, that is going to be achieved by first rendering selected towers, or towers under the cursor, to a separate surface. So I'm going to start by creating a secondary surface, which is going to essentially mirror the application surface. And I'm going to call that something like, let's call it outline surface, and this can be set to surface create. I'm just going to hard code its dimensions to 1280 by 720. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same resolution as the frame buffer of the application surface. Might change these magic numbers to a macro or something later on, once I see that this is working. So the first thing that we're going to do is in, where is the render method? Let's see, what is camera.render? That should just be setting the camera matrices. In the render method, this is just going to be alpha testing, clearing the surface. That's going to set the camera and all of its settings and all of the other stuff. That's fine. So before we do that, before we render the world, let us say surface set target self.outline surface. A couple lines down, we can surface reset target. There's a bit of fun business involving surface settings and camera settings, so I'm going to have to, I believe, say camera.render in here as well, and this is going to ensure that the camera's matrices are set correctly while we're on the secondary surface. And let's see, and then we can just say what is the selected object. I believe that will just be. I hate the fact that I forget the names of all my variables every single time I record one of these videos and I have to go looking it up. It's selected entity. I really should be just getting used to this by now. Anyway, we are going to say if the selected entity is not an undefined value, then we're going to render it. This is going to be the only thing drawn to the surface, and then let's see, is it in the game objects? Like, is it in the... Okay, it's just the draw GUI event. I was gonna ask if it was in the, like the pre-draw event or something like that. Anyway, in the game objects draw GUI event, and I can scroll down to where this is located. Let's say, in addition to drawing the application surface, and this will not be permanent. I'll be removing this as soon as I am satisfied that it's working. Draw surface stretched. The outline surface at position 0, 0, the width can be window get width, and the height can be window get height. Or I won't be deleting this, I'll just be doing something else with it once I'm satisfied that it's working. So, this should be able to run without the game crashing, I hope. And this should, as soon as we try to plop down a tower. I'm just gonna take a wild guess that I can build a tower like here-ish. No? Okay. Okay, so we'll just be drawing this. We'll just be drawing this surface if the P key is pressed on the keyboard, and that way I can actually see the world as I'm messing with it. So let's build you there. Let's hit the P key on the keyboard, and we can see that this tower is being drawn because that is the selected entity. Nothing else is being drawn on the surface. That is what we want. Okay. I suppose that is worthy of a git commit. GitHub Desktop wants to update, apparently. First, I'll do that after I make this commit. Entity, like that. I can just click that button and have GitHub Desktop update in the background without me having to do anything, right? That's how this works. And it should be popping up in like 30 seconds, right? All right, I'm just going to assume that's going to be what's happening. Let's see. Anyway, I don't actually really want the selected entity to be rendered as if it was actually part of the world. What I want is it to be just rendered to really just a solid color. I'm just going to pick a solid color of like white or something like that. Here it comes. Okay. GitHub Desktop is back. So I'm just going to make myself a nice shader. I'm going to call this SHD. Oh gosh, solid color. I don't already have something like that, do I? Do I already have a shader that works something like this? This is the, all right, the selected object shader is kind of like that, but I'm not gonna be touching the solid object, the selected entity shader. So we can set up just the shader header. Considering that I'm not actually going to be using most of these, I don't think it really matters if I give it a, for example, a color and a texture coordinate, because the shader compiler will just optimize that out of the compiled shader code anyway. But it makes me feel better to have it there, so I'm just going to include those attributes. We can get rid of the varyings because we don't need those. We can get rid of the varyings in the fragment shader because we don't need those. And the GL frag color can just be something like vec4 composed of just 4 ones. And that is going to be our solid color. This is going to draw the towers and everything else to a solid white. We can say shader set shd underscore solid color. When we're done, we can shader reset. And the end result of this is that we're going to be rendering whatever the selected tower is, or any other selected object, and it's just going to be a solid white color on our outline surface. So we can start the game, plop down a pebble shooter, how about there, and we still have it being drawn with the, I don't want that, no, please. Oh, you know what? Towers are setting the shader as they're selected inside the inside their own render method, aren't they? I can't say I want that. If selected entity or selected entity hover is self, then you're gonna do this nonsense. We don't really want this. First, let me comment all this out. Second, let me comment all this out. And I hope to be able to get this game to the point where we don't need this by the end of this video. Hopefully not too long. I actually thought ahead to how I want this to work before I hit record today. And let's see. Nope, you are not being drawn. Are you selected? There we go. Now you're selected, and now you are being drawn as a solid color. That's what I want. Okay. So we're gonna take this. We're gonna take the solid color, and we're going to draw an outline around this. We're gonna create an outline around this. In the past, I have done. I have made a video on outline shaders using a Sibel kernel. There are other ways to do outline shaders. I'm just gonna get rid of this, all this commented out code because I don't think we need it anymore. There are other ways to do outlines. There's something that affords you a little bit less control, but it is hopefully a little bit simpler to implement and is hopefully all I need, and that is going to be something called a partial derivatives, which is a scary calculus term that isn't actually that scary because the computer takes care of the hard math for us. This is something I have not made a video on in the past. I hope to soon. Whenever I finish up with 3D collisions, I want to dig down deep into some fun shader things such as partial derivatives. But let me go and create myself a shader. I'm going to call this SHD out. That's a script, isn't it? Let me go and create myself a shader, SHD outline. We can have our position. Let me get rid of it. Let me just set this to like a default. And once again, here's another pretty basic pass-through shader. So we have our input position, we have our input color, we have our input texture coordinate. This is all you really need to draw something that is drawn with like one of GameMaker's sprite or surface functions. The texture coordinate is passed to the fragment shader in the form of a varying, and we are not really doing anything with it so far. If I were to run the game, and if I were to shader, set shader outline, and then reset the shader when we're done, we're just going to be drawing the surface as is. We're just going to be sampling from the texture coordinate, and apparently this needs to be a vector 2, and not a vector 3. Oops. Okay, let's try this now. Okay, very nice. Nothing different has happened. This is basically just a pass-through shader, which is just sampling straight from the texture coordinate. However, we want to be able to detect the outlines of the shape, and rather than drawing the image itself, we just want to draw the outline. You can use the Sobella kernel for this, but I'm going to be using, as I said, partial derivatives in the hopes that this is going to be slightly simpler. Now, there are a bunch of fun things that you can do with partial derivatives, but I'm going to be going with what I believe is the simplest, and that is going to be vec4 base color is going to be the textured sample, the sample texture. And let's make gl underscore frag color equal to a vector 4, which is composed of df base color, df capital F dy base color. Let's give it a 0 on the blue channel and a 1 on the alpha channel. I will explain this momentarily. This will not compile at first. There is something I have to do. As you can see, df and df are they're not color coded by the GameMaker shader editor. And as you can see in the console, there is an error on line 6 with GL OES standard derivatives. This is not something included in GameMaker's version of GLSLES by default. We're going to have to enable this, and the way that we do that is by saying $extension GL OES GL underscore OES underscore standard derivatives :require. No semicolon at the end of this. This should be all we need to get dfdx to work. They will not be syntax highlighted yet, but it will compile. As you can see, there's a different error. I'm gonna need, let's just pick an arbitrary color channel from this from the base color vector instead of the entire vector. dfdx is one of those fun functions. dfdy as well is one of those fun functions that will return the same data type that you pass into it. So it could be an individual float. It could be a vector type of some sort. So of course, if I were to build a tower here, if I were to select the tower, and if I were to hit the P key, we have something resembling an outline. Okay, cool. All right, let me close the game. So as I was saying, dfdx and dfdy are some of those fun functions that will work for any generic type. They will work for an individual float, they'll work for a vector 2, a vector 3, and then they'll just return a value of the same type. So in the case as it was before, I was just passing in base color, which is a vector 4, so it was returning a vector 4, and then I was trying to build a vector 4 with 2 vector 4s and 2 floats, which is like 10 values, which is not really what the vector 4 constructor wants. So instead, I just need to give it a single value, and since the texture that we're sampling from here, that we're drawing of the outline, the outline surface here that we're sampling from is just going to be a black and white image. The red, green, and blue color channels are all going to be the same, so I can just pick red, green, or blue. It's not going to matter. What these functions themselves do, if you're familiar with calculus, you can probably take a guess, and that is going to be that they're going to return the rate of change between each fragment that's drawn. So if there is a harsh cutoff, for example, between two colors in the texture that we're trying to draw, then dfdx will be either +1, -1, something like that. And if there is just a solid color on the texture that we're trying to draw, for example, solid black or solid white, or a small amount of change like a gradient, then dfdx and dfdy will return a much smaller value.
Hey.
And you can use this to do a lot of things, but especially to generate an outline. And we were seeing, if I'm going to run the game again and maybe perhaps zoom in a little bit on what's being drawn in post, you can see that we have some red and we have some green, and in a couple of specific places we have yellow being drawn, but it's a rather pixelated effect. The outline isn't appearing on all sides, and that is because the rate of change returned by df/dx, df/dy can be positive or negative, and color values in computers really can only be between 0 and 1. Outside of that range, they won't really have meaning. They'll just be confined to 0. They'll just be confined to the range of 0 and 1. So what I really want to do instead is take the absolute value of these two values. Any change in the color value should now be positive, and we should now have something more of a full outline, which, as you can see, is what we have. This is more or less what I'm looking for. This is going to be about approximately a 2-pixel wide outline on the boundary of the tower, which, as I said, is what I want. Now, the red, green, and yellow color isn't really what I'm going for. The reason that it's red, green, and yellow is because we are using the red and green channels of this vector 4 that's going into gl_frag color. I just want this outline to be white. I just want the outline to be a solid color for the time being, and I just want the non-outline space to be transparent. So instead, I can put 1, 1, and 1 in the red, green, and blue, the actual color components of the vector 4 that is going to be the GL frag color, and instead I can make the alpha value, the transparency value of the GL frag color, for example, the max of the rates of change in the horizontal or vertical directions. And this will result in the outline being white, and this will result in us being able to see the outline overlaid on top of the game world, assuming nothing goes horribly wrong, which it shouldn't, because this is code that I at least have convinced myself that I've done correctly in the past. And indeed, we can see that we have a white outline being drawn over the tower. And it's not perfect. It looks a little bit low resolution. It's also being drawn around the parts of the tower that are underneath the floor, which is not perhaps what we want. But honestly, it's not that big of a deal for me. I do want the outline to be drawn over things that are in the game world. For example, if the tower that's selected is behind a tree or something, I still want the outline to be drawn over the tree. Okay. Let's see. So I can remove the hold down P key to see the outline in the draw GUI, the GUI method, and that should just allow the outline around selected objects to be drawn regardless of whether or not they're actually you're holding down the P key, and that should allow me to select a tower and have its outline drawn. I can do it again. If I were to go back and forth between two of these towers, you can see the outline changing. If I were to build a magnifying glass, you can see that it has got an outline. If I were to send in a wave, the outline should appropriately change. Why are you still drawing with the glow effect? I don't want that. Does the magnifying glass tower have its own code to do that? Anyway, I'll go through the code and make sure that everything is being drawn correctly later on. The outline is, you may notice, rather thin, and if you're using something more like a Sabel filter, the outline will be a bit thicker, which you may find preferable. I believe this may be due to the fact that is texture filtering turned off by default? I don't remember. I'm pretty sure texture filtering is turned off because, like, I don't need it for anything really in this game. But if I were to draw the outline surface with texture filtering turned on, would it be... Alright, we can see it's a little bit anti-aliased, which is not the worst. You can see it's a little bit more full. Let's, can I round it up to 1? Will that make it a little bit thicker, maybe? Okay, that's actually a lot better. Cool. And again, if I were to select multiple towers, if I were to have multiple towers on the field, then we would be able to flick between them with the outline effect based on what's selected, which is definitely the effect that I'm going for. Okay, those like red spheres that are supposed to indicate fire from that torch look really bad. I'm gonna have to replace that with a particle emitter or something later. All right, so that is the outline shader via partial derivatives. Again, I do want to make more videos on things you can do with partial derivatives. I should probably give the standard disclaimer when it comes to shader extensions. There's a bunch of shader extensions that OpenGL supports. I believe GLOES standard derivatives is the only one that actually really does anything in GameMaker. Not sure why, at least at the current moment with the current graphics capabilities the GameMaker has enabled. It's also worth noting that this is not guaranteed to be supported on all platforms that GameMaker might run on. And when I say it's not guaranteed to be supported on all platforms, I mean anything that's less than like 150 years old, this should work fine. You may find occasionally an edge case with like a really old iPhone or like a really old Amazon Fire TV or something doesn't support partial derivatives. Hey. Certainly any Windows computer will support partial derivatives because DirectX has it built in by default, which is what your shaders compile to anyway on Windows. I do not currently have my Raspberry Pi hooked up. If I did, I would just run it on that, and I am 95% sure that partial derivatives work on the Raspberry Pi as well. I'll test that out before I post this video, and I'll let you know on screen with some big screaming text whether or not it works. But regardless, compatibility realistically should not be much of an issue in 2021. If you're really worried about that, use the Sabella filter. That's just a little bit of matrix math that'll work on anything that supports shaders. There you have it. So I can make a little git commit, and I can say, we've got ourselves an outline effect, which is what we want. I do believe I need to go through some of the extra towers, which may have a special piece of draw code, such as the magnifying glass. I believe this is like this because it needs to like also draw the sunbeam and stuff. But regardless, this glowing effect is not something I really will need right here. I can also get rid of the shader, the cluck apply. That is resetting the lighting shaders at the end. Is there anything else that has its own shader? Entity foes. All right, foes get the billboard shader when it comes to the health bars. I don't really care about that. That's not a concern of mine. This is the generic entity, the environment entity render method. This is for when you're like placing down trees and stuff in the editor. You might want to make those glow as well. I will get to that soon enough. We shall not be worrying about that right now. Search results, and that's really all the equals to shader set. All right, so there's just things that I actually need to do. Okay, so if I were to run the game again, we should have the magnifying glasses being outlined, and also if I were to go into editor mode and slap down a tree, that should be outlined. If it's selected, let me just do that real quick. Magnifying glass. Okay, cool. We have you outlined without being glowing. That's what I want. Interesting. The flypaper dispenser is still doing it. Oh no, that's if you can't build. Why is that? I don't like that. Do I not have enough money? There we go. Okay, so you're properly outlined there. Oh, this is why it was still glowing when you were trying to build something. So if player tower spawn, it checks to see if you can build, and if you can, it doesn't do anything funny to the color, and if you can't, it just continues with your day. Let me comment out this, and we are going to additionally move this down to the outline section. Maybe up to the outline section, because I believe that code is run when those are drawn up above. Let's see. Bird nest. Bird nest? Oh, you know, it's not being drawn at all. Okay, I need to actually draw this. Player tower spawn. So we can first say if player tower spawn, and that's just drawn directly, right? Yeah, that's just drawn directly. We can invoke the render method on this. Like that. And I did say I would test out how it looks in the editor in a minute. I'm just going to deal with that after I make sure that the towers themselves look good. Okay, so we have the actual outline being drawn. We don't have the tower being drawn. That's cool. I mean, I don't want that to be permanent, but it's interesting, I guess. Interesting to look at. If I were to build something else, bug spray, same deal. If I were to tab into the editor and, let's see, can I select you? I can select you. I can select objects. That's one of those weird alter stone things. Scroll through with F4 and F5. Boat small. Select the boat. No, select the boat. Don't. Oh, God, help. I do want to have the glow effect when you, God, when you mouse over something. There we go. You can see the outline being drawn. That's what I want. Okay, so, down here, if player tower spawn, we're just gonna render you rather than just drawing your outline. Okay, there we go. So we are drawing our tower wherever we think it can be built, and we're drawing both the tower and the outline. So I do want the outline to change color. If, for example, I tried to build in the middle of space like this and you can't build, I'm going to make that my next objective. First, let us commit this. Let's see. This is just going to be a bunch of not setting extra shaders. Like this. Oh, by the way, let me test something else real quick. If I were to go into editor mode and if I were to select, okay, it also works if I were to select a path node. The path nodes themselves will still glow if I mouse over them, and I guess while I'm at it, I can undo this commit and fold what I'm about to do next into it. If I were to search again for any shader set which may be lurking around, what is the path node one? Okay. Path node.render. Okay, so this also has some of this fun stuff. I would also like to, that's right, before I forget, editor hover entity is another thing which may potentially cause the selection effect to be drawn. So let me take this out of path node. Let me scroll up. What was it? Editor selected entity. Editor hover entity. We can say if this value is non-null, we can render it on the outline surface as well. And we can now see when I mouse over one of these path nodes, we can draw the outline around it. If I were to exit path node mode, if I were to mouse over, there we go. That's what I like to see. If I were to mouse over one of the other objects, for example, a tree, can I find a tree? Tree dark thin. If I were to mouse over a tree, which is not like part of the fused map, obviously this will not work on objects that have been fused together into the map because these trees are not environment entities anymore. But if I were to mouse over this thing, you can see that it's going to get its own outline effect. If I were to go back to gameplay mode, if I were to build myself a tower, click off of it. If I were to mouse over the tower, it's not going to do that there, which makes it sound like that's just another one of the values that I need to check. Tower selected entity hover. That's another one. Okay, let me also draw an outline around selected entity hover. Okay. And I did say that I was going to enforce the use of the self-reference, or at least I was going to try to start doing that more often in my code, because I have not really been doing that so far. Just to make it like abundantly clear that this is an instance variable. All right, this should be the last thing I need to do. If I were to click off of that, and if I were to mouse back over it, good. Okay, that's a job well done. That is most of what I wanted to do in this video. We can make that commit. How long have I been recording for? I've been recording for 45 minutes. I don't know how that happened. Let's see. So something else that I'd like to do is I'd like to go, admittedly, a little bit further than this. And that's the wrong one. I want the outline shader, which is applied in the draw GUI down here. Let me open that back up. let's see. It would be somewhat nice if we had outlines of different colors, the way that we had the glow effect of different colors. For example, the selected entity could stay white, but perhaps we want the, I don't know, a tower that you're spawning in to be either like red or white or something, depending on whether or not you can actually build it there. Red and green are kind of the classic stop and go colors, but for obvious reasons, red and green are maybe not colors that I should use to code gameplay messages to the player. Something like 11% of male humans in the world and 2% of female humans in the world are red-green colorblind, something like that. And I do not want to make this more difficult than it really has to be for obvious reasons. So if I were to go back into the solid color shader, and if I were to So let's make a long story short and say that did not work out the way that I wanted to. I wanted different outline colors for each of the different situations. So when you're building a tower versus when you're selecting a tower versus something else. But I did not like the way that it came out looking, and it took a long time to get there. So I'm just gonna leave it. Another obvious problem that I do want to address sooner rather than later is that this all works fine until you try to do something like start the game and maybe build a tower and maybe select the tower and then minimize the game and then bring the game back. The game is going to crash because the outline surface has evaporated. That's kind of annoying. That's something that I should probably deal with because people aren't going to like it if the game crashes when they minimize it. Let's see. First, I am going to have too much code in a single code file. This project really started out because I wanted to experiment with making Game Maker games this way, with just like all of the code in a single game object, or at least a couple separate game objects. And I think it's safe to say by now that I do not like the way that it went, and that I think I would rather use Game Maker the normal way. Let's see. The outline surface is going to be outline surface width. This can be like 1280. This can be 720. If I need to bump that down to a lower resolution for things, including but not limited to the Raspberry Pi, I will. Like that. And then wherever we try to surface set target over here, I can say if not surface exists, self.outline surface, then self.outline surface is going to be essentially rebuilt surface create like this. And this is just going to prevent the surface from evaporating while we are trying to still use it. I can get rid of a couple of these extra lines of code. Now, if I were to minimize the game, we should be good to go. So if the game were to appear, if I were to minimize it on the title screen 1, everything should be fine. You see the resizing swap chain message in the console down there, indicating that the game had to rebuild the surface. If I were to actually have something being drawn, again, the game comes back fine. We have the resizing swap chain message down there. Okay. I guess if you really wanted to be safe, you could also do this when that surface is drawn in the GUI event over here. But if you minimize the game, at least currently, Game Maker will halt on, I believe, the beginning of the step event. So it'll never be interrupted in the middle of a draw event. So when we're actually setting the surface target and drawing onto it is when we'll want to check to see if it exists and recreate it. If not, anyway, that is worthy of a git commit. Outline surface may be rebuilt if needed, and I'm going to go onto my my to-do list and move this one to the closed lists. What next? When you are in tower building mode, highlight the area where the tower can be built so the player does not have to guess where it is based on where it changes color. Even more pressingly now that we do not actually change color, we would just like some other indication as to where you can build your towers. When a tower is selected, draw its range on the ground. That might actually be a little bit simpler to do, so I'm going to do that first. Let's see. SHD. Because I apparently thought it was funny to name my lighting shaders this back when I set up the system. Okay, so this shader and its uniforms are only set once. That's fine. I'm going to go into the lighting shader and make a small adjustment, and I'm going to say if you have a tower selected. Okay, so that didn't work either. I had to just undo a bunch of code. I am 0 for 2 so far on what I think is going to be cool effects. Well, maybe 1 for 3, depending on what you're counting. Instead, I think I will piggyback off of the outline system and use that to draw a radius around a tower instead. So let me go create myself a sprite. The sprite can just be SPR tower radius or something like that. I don't need the sprite to be anything fancy. I can just make it a 1x1 white pixel. So if I were to make the width 1, the height 1, and if I were to just make this a 1x1 white pixel or black pixel or any other pixel color that you want, don't really care. Ooh, okay, so I cannot actually center the origin in the middle of a pixel. I'm going to make it 2x2 instead. Let's say resize all frames. There we go. Let's do that instead. So if I were to middle center this, I could, let's say the code is over here. In the render method where we are drawing the tower and its outline and everything, we can say if self.selected entity. We can do a few things. We can draw the sprite. Draw a sprite. SPR tower radius. Sum image 0. X is going to be 0. Y is going to be 0. We're going to be using some good old-fashioned matrix transforms. Matrix set. Matrix world. Matrix build. The X, Y, and Z position can be selected tower.position.x, Y, and Z. Position.x. Position.y, and I'll make it position.z plus, like, I don't know, 1. Something like that. The XYZ rotation can be 0, 0, and 0. The X, Y, and Z scale can be tower.act radius. Is act radius? Range? Act range. Act range on the Y, and just let's go with 1 on the Z. Like that. And that will draw the tower's radius sort of in the form of just like a rectangle on the ground. Okay, so this sort of looks the way I want it to. There's a few obvious problems. One, this is a square, and the radius should be a circle, sort of by definition. The square's side length is the diameter of the space where the tower can target stuff, which is good. The size is correct, but we do want it to actually draw a circle and not a square. So to accomplish what I want, I can do some other shader tricks. And instead of setting the shader to the solid color shader, if you have a selected entity, we can set the shader to something else. We can say, let's draw a create shader SHD tower radius or something like that. And this is going to look a lot like, and I suppose I can hit, hang on. I think they finally fixed the bug where like GameMaker will duplicate extra assets if you just go and hit Control D on something. So I can say shader tower radius on duplicated shader. And if I were to look inside GitHub desktop, we do no longer have any duplicate game assets when I did that, which is good, which is what we want. So let's instead set the shader to the shader tower radius like that. And I'll organize my asset browser later on once I've sort of figured out exactly where I want things to go. So first, we do not have a normal. Since we're just drawing a sprite, we don't have a normal, we don't need that. The shader compiler, as I said, would optimize that out anyway, but just because it makes me feel better, I'm not going to include it. I'm going to include a varying, let's just call it a vec2 is going to be v underscore v world position. Pretty straightforward. V underscore v world position is going to be essentially this, but we're only going to be using the matrix underscore world. We will not be using the view and projection matrix. And since this is just a vector 2, I do not need the z and w coordinates, so I can just say x, y, this vector.xy. Let's copy this varying over to the fragment shader, and we can start out by saying uniform, this can be a vec2 u tower position, and uniform float u tower radius. And I can say if distance between v underscore v world position and u underscore tower position is greater than u underscore tower radius, we can just discard. And I'll make this less awkward, shall we say, later on. But first, before I do that, shader set uniform f. I need to actually set these shader uniforms. Shader gets uniform. I don't think you need to see me typing this out. Again, I will make all this code better later on, but for now, this should allow us to draw, instead of just a straight up square at the base of a tower, this should allow us to draw something more like a circle, like that. Okay, perfect. So we've got like sort of the outline being drawn around the tower, at least the top part, the part that's not within the range. More importantly, we have the range. So I like that. If I were to mouse over the tower, we have the thing being outlined, which is what we want. If I were to click on the tower, we have the range being drawn, which is also what we want. The reason that the bottom part of the outline is not being drawn should become obvious if I were to run this game in debug mode, and if I were to pause the game at the correct moment in time, and if I were to show you exactly what the secondary surface looks like. So if I were to pause the game in the debugger and go into surfaces in the debugger and mouse over this surface 2, you can see that we have just a solid color tower plus radius being drawn at the same time. I'm personally fine with this. If you want both the tower and the radius to be outlined separately, you might want to do something like having a separate outline surface for the tower radius and for the tower itself. You might want to do what I was originally going to do and actually edit the world shader to draw the outline inside the an actual world space to indicate the tower's radius. I think that came out looking pretty bad. You might, if you're making a tower defense game like this and you want to do something similar, you might fiddle around with the numbers and make it look a little bit better. You could probably get away with writing multiple colors to the outline surface, one to indicate the tower's position and another to indicate the tower's radius. And you could effectively, where is it down here? When the outline surface is drawn, you could effectively sample from one color channel and then the other, and you could composite up to 3 different like types of outline on the outline surface, like one on the red channel, one on the green channel, and one on the blue channel. I personally think that's a bit overkill. I might mess around with it on my own time to see if it comes out looking good, but I'm not gonna spend too much time worrying about it now. For the time being, what I will spend time worrying about is let's make a couple local variables. Var u tower position, it's going to be this. Var u tower radius is going to be this, just because I don't want to have lines of code that are like 150 characters long. Next, since I am just absolutely getting like the tower's position over and over and over again, var tower position can be this. and we can just reference that value instead of writing out that long line of code every single time. Okay. Like that. And same for the range. Like that. Oh, you know what? There's another one up here, isn't there? So this code looks a little bit cleaner. This does still have a problem, which is I will try to show it when I let's say build a tower, go into editor mode, and if I were to plop down a tree or something. Oh no! Oh yes, okay. Didn't actually have it clicked on the first time. If you select an environment entity or anything else that does not have a range value, it'll just break. Not really what we want. The position will be fine, since all entities of all types have a position, but only towers have range, and you can select more than one types of thing. Let's see. I'm going to start by committing this. And I'm going to, there's a couple ways this could be dealt with. You could just, for all I care, you could try cats this whole thing, and cats the error. You could try cats this whole thing and simply don't do anything if it errors, if the selected entity does not have a radius. This will work. I have a feeling if I do this, people will yell at me for abusing try catch. So instead, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to piss off a different crowd of people, and let's see, that still works. If I were to plop down something like this and select it, it's fine. There's an error being thrown, but it's being handled. Instead, what I think I'm going to do, instead of this, is piss off a different crowd of people and go, like, fully OOP. And instead of doing this in here, I'm going to go into the entity class. In the entity superclass, I will define an empty method, which is not used here. I will call it render, I don't know, render radius. It's going to be a function. And by default, this is just going to be an empty method. Inside entity tower, I will implement this. So let's go to the bottom of entity tower. Render radius can be a function, which actually does something. And this will also allow me to make this slightly simpler still, because instead of self.selectedentity.position and self.selectedentity.range, we can really just do this directly. And this should also, hang on, I'm not actually calling this code. This should take care of any problems that arose, thanks to entities trying to use their radius value and not having one. So if I were to just go into editor mode, perfect. All right, we're no longer throwing errors. We're not abusing try catch, and the game is properly accounting for when. Where can I build you? The game is properly accounting for where towers can be built. So there's a few other things. One is that there is still no indication of where you can and can't build a tower. I said I would deal with that by like marking the buildable area in the game. You can imagine something like collision painting mode, basically overlaying this on the ground, overlaying the white space on the ground, or maybe the opposite, maybe like blacking out the space on which you can't build, or at least darkening it. There's also the problem of, I would like it to be so that if you were spawning a tower, if you were in the process of spawning a tower, you can also see the radius, because I think that would be helpful. Hang on, stop. I need render radius, like that. Okay. This should... Alright, so I'm getting ready to build a tower. I can view its radius. I can build it there. There is a slight problem in that if I have a tower selected... Oh no, I can't try to build a tower while one's already selected. I was gonna say, if these two radii overlap, it would sort of like merge together, and that would probably not look super good, but that won't ever happen because you can't ever have a tower selected at the same time as you're trying to trying to build another one. And, ooh. Okay. Why is that? That should be gone. You should be getting dereferenced. You should no longer be in the entity list. Okay, that's a new bug. Interesting. Let's see. Towers draw their own radii and selected towers. Selected towers also draw their own radii. Okay, this has turned into another, like, monster marathon session of recording, and admittedly I wasted about probably a half hour in the middle while I was fiddling around with stuff that I ended up not going with, but boy, I remember how quickly the first episodes were going. And, as I said in a couple episodes, I do not mind these later ones stretching out for long durations if they have to, because I would rather that than have this going on for another 6 months, but like, I really want to have this game finished by the end of the year. Anyway, first, let me go and move this over to the closed list. Second, why are when you sell towers, they are not actually removed from the map? I'm pretty sure that when they were doing that, they were not actually firing at enemies. Let me try that again. Hang on. I just want to check that. Okay, so I have a tower built. I'm going to send in a wave. I'm going to just speed things along a little bit so that they get here. You are firing at enemies. I'm going to sell you. And when that happens, you are indeed not firing at enemies, but I can still click on you. Where is selected entity hover set? Am I not removing you from the correct entity list or something like that? Get under cursor, all towers. Okay, so it must not be being removed from the all towers list. When you sell something, we're doing a few things. One, invoking our destroy method, which should be removing us from the map, right? All towers. Hang on. Why are we DS list adding ourselves to the all towers? That doesn't... DS list remove? DS list delete index? Hang on, what is it? DS list delete. DS list find value. Hang on, wait. That needs to be DS list find index. I'm surprised if this is all it is. I'm surprised that I never found this to be a problem before, that I never tried doing this and noticed that it wasn't working. Alright, let's sell you, and now when I mouse over you, you are no longer there, and like it's not going to be crashing the game or anything because you are successfully removed from that list. Okay. Interesting. I'm very surprised I did not notice that was a problem before. When you sell a tower, you shouldn't... I'm guessing that I just, like, copied and pasted this from add to map or something like that, and forgot to change it, or maybe I just wasn't thinking, and by habit I said DS list add instead of DS list delete. Anyway, fun. Bug stomping. I wish all bugs were that easy to solve. Anyway, the last one, when you're in tower building mode, highlight the area where the tower can be built. As I said, I'm thinking that I'm going to accomplish that by passing another sampler. I'm going to be editing the world shader, and I'm going to be passing another sampler, texture sampler to the tower radius. Okay, so first I actually need this to be a texture sampler. And the reason that I left this to the end is because this could very easily turn into like a whole thing, which I guess it already technically is because that's the list that it's in this task list. Let's see, where is load a map? So the collision grid, that is like temporary stuff like towers and whatever. The fuse.collision, okay. Where is that actually drawn, and how is it drawn? Okay, so first, I'm just going to attach another sprite that we're going to be using as a texture to the, fuse data, and Let's initialize it to -1, and I'm also just going to give this a method. Which is going to just automatically generate a collision sprite for us. And that is going to look an awful lot like this. Where are we? This code to set the collision information to the surface that's being drawn in the editor. Fused equals down here. Let's call it csurf for a shorter name because it's a temporary variable. Update all those references. When we're done, surface free csurf because we're done with it. Fuse.collision can obviously just be self.collision. Like that. And then if sprite exists, self.collision sprite. Sprite delete self.collision sprite. Self.collision sprite is going to equal sprite create from surface. The surface is going to be C surf. X is going to be 0. Y is going to be 0. Width is going to be surface get width and surface get height. Remove back is going to be false. Smooth is going to be false. X origin is going to be 0. Y origin is going to be 0. X origin and Y origin don't actually matter. And then, let's see. Let me correct the indentation here a little bit. Generate collision sprite is just going to be called whenever the collision information is modified. Like this, and also when it is edited. Down here. Specifically, this is changed when you leave collision mode, collision editor painting mode, isn't it? Okay, first let me run this. Let me just make sure that this does not crash the game instantaneously, and then I will actually make sure that it is being drawn. Okay, the game is not crashing instantaneously. If I were to go into editor mode like this, and if I were to exit editor mode, to exit collision painting mode rather, it would not be crashing. Okay, good. And then let us go to GUI down here, and then let me just draw sprite. I'll draw the collision sprite, subimage 0, x 0, y 0. It'll be small, but it will be okay, it'll be trying to draw a non-existent sprite. If so, let's only draw it if the sprite actually exists. And this should tell us if it looks correct or not. Otherwise, okay, it is being drawn underneath the UI. That does indeed look correct. That is the shape of the collision. We can see looks the same. It's just at a quarter resolution. Okay. Next, I would like to attach this as a texture sampler to the shader that is being used to draw the game world. I can say uniform sampler 2D, collision sampler. I can, down here, texture set stage, shader get sampler index. This is going to be whatever the world shader is. The uniform name is going to be, actually, let's call it sampler collision instead. And the texture ID can be sprite get texture self.fuse.collision sprite subimage 0. It would be a good idea to only do this if sprite exists. self.fuse.collision sprite. Otherwise, don't bother because that means there is no collision data to be sampled from. And inside shader underscore world, we are going to go down into the fragment shader, and for each fragment, we have the world position available to us in this lighting shader via one of the lighting varyings, light world position down there, and I can say something like vec for color from collision or something is going to equal texture 2D, the sampler collision. The vec2 is going to be equal to light world position dot x divided by, what's the size of these maps? I want to say it's like 1366 by 768. 1366 by 768. 1366.0 light world position dot y divided by 768.0. For now, gl underscore frag color is going to be equal to color from collision, and that should color each of the worlds based on collision information. I believe this will just be a white pixel prior to the game world being set, okay? And if we were to go into the actual game world, we can see... This looks normal. Okay, if we were to go into the actual game world, we can see exactly where things are. Or at least we can see a small scale model of where the collision information is on the world, which is something akin to what I want. I believe I'll also need to divide it by 4.0 here, since that's the scale of this collision surface, since it's not full resolution. I believe. Let me just try this. All right, yeah, this looks a little more accurate. Unless this is wrong in like the other direction. I think this is wrong in the other direction. What's the... It is 1/4, isn't it? You know what it is? Textures in Game Maker need to be square powers of 2, which these are not. So let me divide, instead of by 1366 and 768, let me divide instead by the nearest larger powers of 2, and then, yeah, there we go. Now we have the world being blended with the paint color, so you can paint in this area. I mean, you can build in this area, rather, if you are trying to build a tower there, that's fine. If you're trying to build a tower, for example, here, that is not. Once you get it approximately, yeah, there we go. Once you get it approximately in a space that is can be built on, that's fine. So, okay, wow, that was annoying. Instead of hard coding these in, I'm going to add another uniform. Let's call it uniform vec2 sampler collision scale, and then we can divide by actually instead of dividing by that there, we can just simply divide this entire vec2 by that value. This is going to be the size of the texture page that this texture lives on. So if I were to say shader set uniform f, we've seen this function many times now. Shader get uniform, and the uniform name is going to be sampler collision size, and the values are going to be, I hate the fact that there's like no built-in way to do this, but log2 of sprite get width self.fused.collision sprite. This is going to be if your collision sprite size is like 1366 or something like that. Log2 1366. I might have a better time. Okay, so that's going to be about 10.4-ish. I was going to say I might get a better answer if I went to like Wolfram Alpha or something. If I were to the next greatest power of 2 from 1366 would be 2048. I should be able to just seal this. This would give us an 11, and then I should be able to power 2 to this value, and that should give me the next greatest power of 2 for the horizontal. And I can save this to a variable, and I can call it something like var text size horizontal is going to be that. Var text size vertical is going to be the same thing essentially, but for sprite get width. Sprite get height. And then text size horizontal, text size vertical. And this, I do wish it would make my life easier in a number of places if there was just a standard, like part of the GameMaker standard math library was a function that just let you do this, get the next greatest or occasionally lowest power of 2 from a value. And I also actually don't want it to be sprite get width. I want it to be room width, because that is the space and room height. That is the dimensions of the playing field that we're going to be on. I need one more of those. And this should allow me to yeah, okay, so we're going to be correctly mapping the size of the collision area to the game world. If you were to go into collision painting mode, you can see that it lines up exactly. You can see that like the area on which you can't build is sort of doubly marked over. Okay, that's fine. Is there anything? Okay, so next I'm going to have one more uniform. This is going to be uniform float sampler collision strength. And this is going to be simply the amount at which the color of the collision area is blended with the color of the actual game world. I'm going to be adding a little bit more to this in a minute, but first let me shader set uniform. Let me just give this a value of like, say 0.5 or so. This is going to make the game look exactly as it did before, and then I'm just going to actually make it look good. Except it's going to be somewhat controllable by the uniform. Again, can build you there, and we're this tower is somewhat grayed out, thanks to the fact that it's like within that zone. And the other thing I want to do is only actually do this if you are trying to spawn a tower, like so, because you really do not need this information otherwise. And I believe since this is never actually going to be unset, yeah, okay. Let me move that instead inside if that it has a truth value, else we're going to just, we're going to make it 0, like that. And after this, finally, instead of having it being just blended with the color of the sprite, we're going to be sampling some information from the sprite. So, all right, there we go. Goes back to normal once the tower has been placed. We're going to be just sampling some information from the sprite, and we're going to actually, I think, darken the world that it can't be built on. But if you can build on it, it'll just be its normal color. Let me think about how the math for that is going to work for just one moment. Actually, hang on, git commit this. So the simple way to do this would be to say, let me just go back to glfrag color is going to equal color. The simple way to do this would be with an if statement that says something like, if color from collision.r is less than 1.0, then gl underscore frag color.rgb is going to times equal like sampler collision strength, and that will darken it. That will darken the areas outside. And let's see. Yeah, okay, so, wow. Okay, that's not being... All right, this should be set to 0.5 regardless. Hang on. Okay, if no player tower spawn, that should be set to 1. Okay, other way around. Okay, much better. So we're going to be darkening the non-buildable areas. This is much more similar to what I had in mind. It's only going to be doing this when you attempt to build something. To do this without an if statement, because if statements in shaders like this tends to make some people anxious. Let me try and turn this into a math expression. So RGB, whatever, doesn't matter. That's, again, it's going to be a black and white image. All three color channels are going to be the same. Let me try, instead of something like this, let me just simply multiply this by the floor of that value. So this value rounded down. Now this is going to make the non-buildable area completely black because this value rounded down will be a 0, and sampler collision strength times 0 is going to be 0, and then the color times that is going to also be 0. You can see that that is more or less what's happening here. So instead of this, can I max 0.5 and that? And that's not going to take care of the fact that this is still going to happen if you're not trying to actively build anything, but it should, yeah, okay. It at least makes it not black, which I think is the desired outcome. Hang on, I have an idea. What about 1.0 minus that? What about doing this? If I was a good game developer, I would be working this out on paper first, but I'm not a good game developer, so I will not be working this out on paper first. I will be trying to just work through the math in my... That's the opposite of what I want. Okay, this is what I was going for. So, the exact code, I just spent time fiddling around with this because you probably don't want to hear me talk any longer. So we are going to just, instead of just multiplying the RGB value by a number, I'm going to make use of linear interpolation from the existing color to 0, based on the product of the sampler collision strength and the inverse of the color that was sampled from the texture. It's the inverse because the buildable area is white on that texture and the non-buildable area is black, and you kind of maybe would want that to be the other way around, unless the and I see the game is going and playing on its own. You might want that to be the other way around. Was that... In certain places, this is not appearing to be lit. Anyway, if you wanted to mark out the buildable area with like a darkened color and the rest of the game with a non-darkened color, then maybe that might be what you want, but regardless. Alright, I think this is good enough. Why is can I clamp this between 0 and 1? Why was the lighting like disappearing in certain places? It's not a huge deal, it's just that's just a minor visual issue, but why was that happening all the same? If I can't replicate it, I won't lose sleep over it, but it was like if I put it around here. Alright, anyway. Seems to be working. That is what I wanted to accomplish today. That was a very long video. Wolfram Alpha, not really something that I ended up using. I don't know why I actually opened it. Okay, that's going to be that last commit. I can move this to the close section. There's a chance that I'll noodle around with this on my own to make it look a little bit better, but I'm pretty satisfied with how it came out looking, so I'm probably going to just give it a rest. Otherwise, let's see. Next time, I think it is finally time for me to make some less sucky 3D models for the bugs and the towers and stuff. I will try to prepare that ahead of time, and then I will implement them into the game. I will probably have some actual fire emanating from the fire towers instead of those awful looking ball things. I also would like to do this card in particular. Once the bugs have properly 3D models, you can remove the texture coordinate from the vertex format and save a few bytes per vertex, and also a texture lookup. But we'll see. For now, My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. If you want the code for this, look down in the look down in the video description for a GitHub repository. What did I just do? I just totally undid that, didn't I? Did not want to undo that. Wanted to create tag. This is what, 0.56 I believe is this week? Yeah, 5.5 was the last one. Yeah, look for the GitHub repository down in the video description. Look for the 0.56 release. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute towards these videos being made, there will be links to that in all the usual places as well. You can see your name in the credits, hear yourself shouted out at the end, see a preview of my future plans, that kind of thing. Otherwise, I try to post about 2 game dev videos a week, one of these and one tutorial. I hope you all enjoyed that, and I will see you all later. This video is really not going to be fun to edit, is it? Special thanks to Connor, Edward Holt, Emily Koyo, Posho, Sindra Larson, Tusk, and Zenjamin for supporting these videos. If you want to see your name in the credits or hear yourself shouted out at the end, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.